The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon on the banks of the Granicus River in 334 before Common Era. Alexander, barely 22 years old, stood at the edge of the water, his armor glinting faintly in the fading light. Across the river, the Persian army stretched as far as the eye could see, tens of thousands of soldiers arrayed in disciplined formations, ready to defend the richest empire the world had ever known. Most men in Alexander's position would have hesitated, even retreated, but not him. With a fierce determination, he ordered his cavalry to charge straight into the water, plunging into battle at dusk, relying on audacity, timing, and the courage of his companions to turn the odds in his favor. This moment captures the essence of Alexander the Great. How could a young king from the rugged hills of Macedonia dismantle the Persian Empire, an empire that had dominated the Near East for more than 2 centuries, in less than a decade? It seems impossible. And yet Alexander did more than conquer lands. He transformed the world. He did not simply redraw borders. He erased an empire, reshaped cultures, and planted the seeds of what would become the Hellenistic Age, a period when Greek and Eastern traditions fused in art, science, language, and governance in ways that still echo today. His campaigns created cities that became centers of learning and trade, spreading ideas and knowledge from Greece to India. And his influence can be traced in everything from astronomy to architecture centuries later. To appreciate the scale of his achievement, it is important to remember what he faced. The Persian Empire was vast, stretching from the Mediterranean coast to the borders of India. It was wealthy, powerful, and organized under a monarch whose armies numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Alexander, by contrast, commanded a relatively small army, trained but outnumbered, facing opponents who knew the terrain and had vast reserves of troops. Yet his victories were not just the result of bravery. They were the product of vision, strategy, and a willingness to take calculated risks that other leaders would never consider. But Alexander was not born on a battlefield. To understand how he could confront and overcome such overwhelming odds, we must first look at the world that shaped him. He was born in 356 before Common Era in Pella, the capital of Macedonia, a kingdom on the northern edge of the Greek world. Macedonia was rugged and fiercely independent, a land of hills, forests, and warriors. From a young age, Alexander was exposed to stories of heroes, gods, and legendary battles. His father, King Philip II, had transformed Macedonia into a military powerhouse, reforming the army, introducing new tactics, and unifying a kingdom that had once been fragmented. Alexander inherited more than a crown. He inherited a vision of conquest, discipline in warfare, and the belief that the world could be changed by a single determined individual. His education was equally formidable. Tutored by Aristotle, one of the greatest thinkers of the age, Alexander learned philosophy, science, medicine, and literature. He studied Homer and the tales of Achilles, whose courage and honor would become a personal model for Alexander. By the time he ascended to the throne at 20, he was already a man shaped by extraordinary intellect, ambition, and a deep understanding of both the world and how to command it. The stage was set for a campaign that would challenge empires, defy expectations, and leave a legacy that continues to fascinate historians and storytellers alike. Alexander inherited a kingdom already forged for war, but inheriting power did not mean inheriting stability. When King Philip II was assassinated in 336 before Common Era, Macedonia stood at a dangerous crossroads. The army was loyal, but the throne was vulnerable. Rival claimants emerged. Foreign enemies sensed weakness, and the Greek city-states to the south saw an opportunity to break free from Macedonian dominance. At just 20 years old, Alexander faced the greatest test of his life before he had even marched beyond his borders. He acted with speed and resolve. Potential rivals within Macedonia were eliminated, securing the loyalty of the nobility and the army. When news of Philip's death sparked unrest across Greece, Alexander responded decisively. Cities that had once bowed to Macedonian authority began to rebel, believing the young king inexperienced and weak. Alexander moved south with remarkable speed, confronting resistance before it could fully organize. His campaign culminated in the destruction of Thebes, a powerful Greek city that had openly revolted. The message was unmistakable. Macedonia's rule would continue, and Alexander would tolerate no challenge to his authority. This ruthless consolidation of power shocked the Greek world. Many had underestimated Alexander, seeing him only as Philip's son, rather than a leader in his own right. Instead, they now faced a commander who combined his father's discipline with an even greater sense of urgency and ambition. By 335, before Common Era, Greece was subdued, not through diplomacy alone, but through the clear demonstration of overwhelming force. Alexander was confirmed as leader of the Corinthian League, granting him formal authority to lead a united Greek campaign against Persia. What made this moment extraordinary was the inheritance Alexander now fully controlled. Philip had spent decades building the most effective army in the Greek world, the Macedonian phalanx. Armed with long sarissa spears, could dominate enemy infantry through reach and cohesion. Heavy cavalry, especially the elite companion cavalry, provided devastating offensive power. The army was professional, disciplined, and experienced, trained not merely to defend Macedonia, but to project power far beyond its borders. Philip had planned a war against Persia, but it would be Alexander who transformed that plan into reality. Yet the army alone does not explain what came next. Alexander brought something new to the Macedonian war machine, a relentless personal vision. He did not see Persia merely as an enemy to be punished or a rival to be checked. He saw it as a prize to be claimed in its entirety. Where Philip had balanced conquest with diplomacy, Alexander sought decision and finality. He intended not to raid Persian territory, but to dismantle the empire itself. By 334, before Common Era, preparations were complete. Alexander crossed into Asia Minor with a force that was small by Persian standards, but unmatched in training, cohesion, and leadership. He framed the campaign not only as a war of conquest, but as an act of liberation. Greek cities under Persian control were promised freedom, while Macedonian soldiers were promised glory, wealth, and a place in history. This careful blend of ideology and ambition helped secure loyalty and morale as the army moved into hostile territory. At this point, Alexander was no longer merely defending his inheritance. He was reshaping it. The secure throne, the disciplined army, and the unified Greek world behind him formed the foundation upon which his later victories would rest. Every decision made in these early years, from the destruction of rebellious cities to the assumption of supreme command, removed obstacles that could have shattered his campaign before it began. When Alexander finally confronted the Persian satraps at the Granicus River, he did so as a fully consolidated ruler, commanding not just soldiers, but momentum itself. The young king who charged into the river at dusk was not acting on impulse alone. He was executing a vision years in the making, one forged through crisis, consolidation, and an unshakable belief that the greatest empire on earth could be brought down by speed, daring, and decisive action. Alexander faced Persian forces far greater than his own, which were positioned to defend the western border of the empire. But without hesitation, he led his cavalry straight into the river, attacking through water and mud, relying on courage and discipline. The battle was fierce and chaotic, but Alexander's forces prevailed. This victory was not just a military triumph, it was a signal to the world that a new power had risen and that Alexander's bold, unconventional approach would define his conquests. Following Granicus, Alexander moved along the coast, liberating Greek cities under Persian control, winning both strategic and symbolic victories. One of the most famous moments came in Phrygia, where he confronted the Gordian knot. According to legend, the knot was impossible to untie and destined to be conquered only by the future ruler of Asia. Alexander did not labor over the puzzle. Instead, with a single stroke of his sword, he cut through it, demonstrating decisiveness, audacity, and a willingness to defy convention. His momentum continued at the Battle of Issus in 333 before Common Era. There, he faced King Darius III in a confrontation that tested the limits of strategy and courage. Alexander's smaller, more disciplined army exploited the terrain and struck at the Persian center. Darius fled the battlefield, abandoning his family in the chaos, an act that shocked the ancient world and demoralized his troops. Alexander treated Darius's family with respect, a gesture that earned him both admiration and political leverage. Alexander's campaigns extended along the eastern Mediterranean. The siege of Tyre was legendary for its difficulty, requiring months of engineering ingenuity and relentless pressure before the city finally fell. Each conquest strengthened his reputation for brilliance and determination. By the time he entered Egypt, he was celebrated not just as a conqueror, but as a liberator. In 332 before Common Era, he was welcomed as pharaoh and founded the city of Alexandria, a lasting symbol of Greek culture and learning in the heart of the ancient world. The apex of his campaign came at Gaugamela in 331 before Common Era. Darius III had assembled an enormous army, but Alexander's tactical genius turned the battlefield to his advantage. Through clever formations, feigned retreats, and decisive cavalry charges, Alexander broke the Persian lines and forced Darius to flee once again. The victory opened the gates to Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the empire. In Persepolis, Alexander allowed the ceremonial burning of the royal palace, an act of retribution for Persian invasions of Greece decades earlier, blending symbolism with strategy. Alexander's leadership was defined by personal bravery and adaptability. He often led from the front, inspiring his soldiers through example, yet he also recognized the value of compromise. He adopted Persian customs, married Persian nobility, and encouraged his soldiers to intermarry, forging political alliances and promoting cultural fusion. By proclaiming himself heir to the Achaemenid throne, he positioned himself not just as a conqueror, but as a ruler of a new cosmopolitan world, where Greek and Persian traditions could coexist. Yet even at the height of his triumph, challenges began to emerge. The Macedonian veterans, loyal but weary, began to chafe under the relentless pace of conquest. Governing a vast, diverse empire demanded compromises and strategies that sometimes conflicted with the expectations of his own people. Alexander's vision was limitless, but with unlimited ambition came the seeds of tension and discontent, foreshadowing the trials that would follow even as he seemed invincible. Alexander's ambition knew no bounds. By 326, before Common Era, he had reached the banks of the Hydaspes River in the far reaches of the Indian subcontinent. There he faced King Porus, a local ruler renowned for his courage, and the formidable war elephants that strengthened his army. The battle was fierce and unprecedented for the Macedonian troops, who had never faced such beasts in combat. Yet Alexander's strategy and personal bravery prevailed. He led charges, adapted to the new threats, and ultimately defeated Porus, who, impressed by Alexander's conduct, was allowed to retain his kingdom as a loyal ally. The victory at Hydaspes demonstrated Alexander's tactical genius and his ability to integrate diverse cultures into his expanding empire. Despite the triumph, Alexander's army was exhausted. Months of continuous campaigning, harsh terrain, and long marches had taken a heavy toll. When he reached the Issus River, his troops refused to advance further into unknown lands. They were homesick, battle-weary, and unwilling to risk what remained of their strength. Alexander, facing the first serious mutiny of his career, made the fateful decision to turn back. The retreat marked the limit of his eastward expansion and the beginning of a grueling return journey that would test the limits of his leadership. The return through the Gedrosian Desert was brutal. Scorching heat, scarce water, and harsh conditions decimated his army. Thousands of soldiers perished and morale sank to dangerous lows. Along the way, tensions grew within Alexander's ranks. Some questioned his judgment, others feared his growing absolutism, and conspiracies began to stir in the shadows. Alexander's response was increasingly severe, including the execution of close companions suspected of disloyalty. He adopted elements of Persian royal culture, embracing rituals and ceremonial authority that created distance between him and his Macedonian veterans, deepening the isolation of a man who had once inspired unshakable loyalty. In 323, before Common Era, Alexander died suddenly in Babylon at the age of 32. Contemporary sources suggest he succumbed to a fever, though later rumors speculated on poison. His death left no clear heir. His only legitimate son was an infant, and the empire, vast and diverse, lacked a unifying authority. Within years, his generals, known as the Diadochi, divided the empire among themselves, plunging the territories into conflict. Politically, Alexander's empire collapsed almost as quickly as it had risen. Yet the impact of his conquests extended far beyond immediate politics. Alexander's campaigns spread Greek language, culture, and ideas across 3 continents. He founded more than 70 cities, many named Alexandria, which became centers of learning, trade, and administration. His blending of Greek and local customs created a new cultural fusion known as the Hellenistic world, which shaped art, architecture, science, and governance for centuries. Trade routes from the Mediterranean to India flourished under this new connectivity, and the Greek influence persisted long after the political structures of his empire fragmented. Alexander's life proved a singular historical truth. One extraordinary individual, equipped with vision, strategy, and unrelenting determination, could reshape the world. His legacy inspired later leaders such as Julius Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte, and countless others who sought to emulate his audacity. Yet his story also serves as a cautionary tale. Power concentrated in a single man is fragile, fleeting, and capable of both incredible creation and profound destruction. The world Alexander touched was forever changed, a testament to the transformative potential of ambition, courage, and vision.